Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's event, hosted by the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. It's Tuesday, September 10th. Today's panel will discuss the U.S.-Israel security relationship, including challenges ahead. I'm Bradley Bowman, Senior Director of FDD's Center on Military and Political Power. We're pleased to have you here, some in person, some tuning in live, some listening to our podcast for this conversation. The title for our event today is Strategic Planning in Chaos, the Future of U.S.-Israel Security Partnership. Chaos is certainly one word for what we're seeing in the Middle East. I might have also chosen the word uncertainty. We're witnessing an extraordinary degree of uncertainty when it comes to fundamental questions related to Israel, U.S. interests in the Middle East, and the path forward. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists who harbor a sick Islamist ideology that is simultaneously anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and let there be no doubt, anti-American, conducted a surprise terror attack against Israel, systematically assassinating and murdering men, women, and children in the most depraved ways imaginable. It was the worst single day for Jews since the Holocaust. Along with our Israeli allies, Americans were killed and taken hostage, and some remain locked in Hamas terror tunnels in Gaza these many months later. In retrospect, with the benefit of hindsight, Hamas's actions should not have been a surprise. One need only read Hamas's original charter and the propaganda its terrorists left behind on October 7th to understand that the terror group's goals were and remain nothing short of murdering Jews and the extermination of the world's only Jewish state, a country roughly the size of New Jersey in a land where Jews first made their home more than 3 millennia ago. How did Israel respond to this October 7th terrorist atrocity? Israel has gone after those who committed the atrocity to ensure they could never do so again. That should sound familiar. Israel responded in the same way Americans would have and the same way Americans did after another surprise terror attack, 9/11, a terrorist atrocity that we especially remember tomorrow. In the months since October 7th, Israel confronted an adversary entrenched in hundreds of miles of terror tunnels that were systematically hiding and operating under or near civilians to save their own terrorist skins so they can kill again. Meanwhile, Hamas took deliberate actions to increase civilian casualties that could then be used as fodder in a political warfare campaign for the purpose of demonizing and isolating Israel in the United States and Europe, and thereby trying to deprive Israel of the means of self-defense. Now, despite longstanding efforts, not surprisingly, a ceasefire in Gaza remains elusive. It remains to be seen whether this administration will use its leverage with Cairo to ensure that Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza cannot use arms smuggling under and over the border between Gaza and Egypt to rearm. There's a fundamental American interest in ensuring such an outcome. Let's see whether this administration understands that reality and uses its leverage with Egypt. We also see uncertainty with Hezbollah. Hezbollah started attacking Israel on October 8th. In Israel's north, tens of thousands of Israelis remain displaced from their homes, even as the Israel Defense Forces and Hezbollah continue to trade attacks in a low-scale war that has been increasing in intensity. For now, at least, both sides seem to want to avoid an escalation to a major war, but such conflicts resist indefinite management and can easily spin out of control. But the status quo in Israel's north seems untenable, both from a political and security perspective. Israelis must be able to return to their homes, and that means pushing Hezbollah back. If the international community, the United Nations, UN peacekeepers, and key capitals fail to enforce UN Security Council Resolution 1701, Israel may have no choice but to resort to a major war in Lebanon. Such a war would be far worse for Israel than we have seen with Hamas, and the devastation in Lebanon could exceed some of what we've seen in Gaza. Any American visitor to Israel in recent years has been accustomed to hearing Israelis start a briefing with saying they have 3 top priorities: Iran, Iran, and Iran. These days, however, most of the talk is of Hamas, Hezbollah, and now the Houthis. That is a serious mistake. Iran wants to use its terror proxies to distract, wear down, and bleed Israel, even as Tehran inches toward a nuclear weapon. And between the American presidential election in November and the January 20th inauguration of the new president, there's a particular window of danger, as Ord Kitri, I, and Behnam Ben Talbou detailed in an FDD monograph published on August 29th. If the United States does not pursue specific deterrent steps in the coming weeks, Tehran could pursue significant additional steps toward a nuclear weapon or even a sprint to a nuclear bomb to present the next American president with a fait accompli. The essence of strategy is establishing priorities, and the number one threat to Israel and the number one threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East is the Islamic Republic of Iran and its progress toward a nuclear weapon. Yet our conversations, our policies, and our allocation of finite resources sometimes does not reflect that fact. So lots of questions and lots of uncertainty. But a few things, at least from my perspective, are certain. The United States and Israel enjoy a uniquely deep, broad, and enduring relationship that transcends parties and administrations. Israel is the United States' closest and most reliable ally in the Middle East, and the United States is Israel's indispensable ally. All of Israel's enemies are America's enemies, and Washington has no more capable or determined ally than Israel when it comes to going after that subset of U.S. adversaries, including the Islamic Republic of Iran and its terror network, some of whom have repeatedly attacked U.S. forces in the Red Sea and in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. At a time when China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are cooperating in troubling new ways to target the United States, our allies, and its interests, it is good and necessary to have friends, and Israel is among America's best friends. What's also certain to me is that helping Israel is not charity, it is a wise investment in our own national security interests, and the capabilities Israel is developing today, in many cases, are exactly the kinds of capabilities American forces will need in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere in the coming years.